Welcome, Sisa and Nonku and the team from SA Tourism. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
I'm sure that we all know that the mood is a little down, but I think we're all in this together and we are staying strong. Thank you once again to SA Tourism for sponsoring these webinars and for being available in an extremely busy, uncertain time, Sisa, ready to talk to industry. Without further ado, I'm going to kind of ask you what the current mood is. How there's obviously huge impact on the tourism sector. Can you kick us off and just kind of take us through that?
Thank you, and thanks very much. And thank you for the opportunity to come and share some of the thoughts and answer some of the questions. Certainly, we find ourselves in unprecedented times.
Absolutely.
The environment, the situation is very fluid. It's changing on a regular basis. And at times we see ourselves or find ourselves chasing our tails a bit. Just to kind of give context, and this is a global phenomenon. It's impacting the entire world, and it's actually at its core, affecting trade and just basic business. Now, tourism is not immune and is at the front end of it. I always tell people that, tourism is a perishable product. You can't stockpile it. And as a result, then, in terms of it's impacted first. However, to balance this off, at the same time, is that it will be the first sector to recover in terms of the recovery around it. Now, we've seen various countries around the world take various actions. We've seen delays for certain countries. We certainly are being led by the president and the country's announcements in terms of, how we respond to the turmoil. We've seen countries have said that close off their borders and essentially not allowing people in or out. That immediately impacts us in terms of from a source market. If we previously received tourists from that country, well, they're no longer coming. Last week, Sunday, the president announced a raft of measures, essentially really twofold. One, no congregation or gatherings of more than 100. That immediately you would hit the MICE space, the conferencing, exhibitions, and the incentive space in that sense. And then secondly, barring or banning, entry of people, citizens coming from the high-risk countries. Now, let me define in terms of let me state who defines high-risk countries. It is actually as per World Health Organization classifications. So they pronounce on a regular basis categories, who's high risk, medium risk, etc. from that regard. To give you a bit of a sense of how quickly this is changing, when this kind of really first became an issue a couple of weeks back, and we saw conference cancellations mostly in East Asia, we saw a couple of them in Europe and in the US, I was quite adamant that this is an opportunity for South Africa. We would put up our hand and say, well, we can host all those conferences that are cancelled. Well, move further down the line, start realizing that actually it doesn't matter whether at that time you had 0 cases of confirmed coronavirus. It was the people that were going to be gathering that you were not sure where they're going to come from. Move a couple of weeks later, it was quite evident, that domestic tourism will be the antidote, to all of this. Well, this was until we had first cases of internal transmissions or transfers that put a damp on that one. I'm giving you a bit of a sense of how this is moving on quite quickly and how we are trying to catch up with it. Now, the commitment that we are making is to saying we want to communicate frequently, we want to communicate clearly to the sector to provide some form of guidance so they can make informed decisions. However, I must warn that we are essentially making decisions on imperfect or incomplete, picture from that perspective, And as a result, and I know a lot of people in the sector are looking for detailed answers. Here's to give a bit of a sense in terms of the decision-making matrix. At the moment, government is prioritizing the health of its citizens as per the Constitution. That comes in first. That's the kind of lead. Everything else takes second fiddle to that one. Whilst I agree, whilst I also, empathize in the sector, we may be looking for answers. So the first decision that I made, the president and the cabinet says, how do I protect the citizens of this country? What are the measures that we need to put in place? Last week, that was the first ratchet of announcements in order to curtail that one. The president is also due today, later on this evening, to announce also any further developments. Now, I have no clue as to what those announcements will be, but believe me, whatever they are at, I now have to scramble to make sure that we can get our heads around it in terms of what it means. Yeah. Now, let me speak openly and realistically. We will feel some pain. There will be businesses that close. There will be jobs that will be lost. I was actually telling a colleague, it almost feels like a contest as to who can hold their breath the longest. Now, in this, some will faint along the way. They just simply won't have it. Some will have bigger balance sheets, and there's almost the oxygen supply. Now, we don't know how long this phenomenon will last for. Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Is it a year? And as a result, we're driving in the dark as a bit. Then you also have these external decisions that are made as well that we have to comply with. We are currently now in what we call the state of national disaster, almost like a middle ground before the state of emergency. Now, with each state that's been announced, the implications of those ones actually go down quite deep there. Now, before I take on some questions, I just want to answer three kind of topical issues that I know that have been coming through quite a lot here. The first one is the impact of airline cancellations. Now, when airlines cancel flights, and again, it is purely from a consequence of closing down your borders. There is no one that can actually move between the two. When one of the world's largest carriers, such as Emirates, decides it's totally shutting down, and I saw now they're reversing some of that a bit, but it gives you a sense of how there is not clarity around.
Yes,
they make a decision to shut down, and then a couple of hours later, okay, we can open up and partially, because they're constantly trying to catch up as to what is happening around the world. We are no different, and I think that's basically the sense. I'm really prevailing for some calm and logic to come through in certain environments, and where people don't have answers, don't know what to do, I would say almost defer to the most conservative opinion or view or implementation thereof that you can have, right?
Yeah.
Now, when airlines cancel, you can imagine the trickle-down effect on hotels, to operators, sites, shuttles, catering, the entire toot is really kind of impacted on that perspective. We are also seeing announcements on a daily basis, again, of airlines canceling from that perspective. To give you further a sense is that we have to prepare ourselves to make these sacrifices now in order to have a sector further down the line. It is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We will overcome this. I simply cannot give you in terms of how long it will take, but it is in how we actually carry ourselves through this that will actually set us up for the level of recovery that we have, but also in terms of our global reputation as to how South Africa handled this. We have to be responsible. We have to be responsible to our citizens first. We have to be responsible also to our visitors coming through the country as well. Now, there's two things. One is that we made an announcement yesterday that we are looking to compile a national register of where tourists are at across the country. Here's the reason basically behind it. First of all, there is an Immigration Act of 2002 that compels all hotels, motels, accommodation establishments that they have to keep a register of containing the details of persons who are staying at the accommodation. Now, what we are looking to do is to have a country view of where tourists are at. Where are the heat centers, right? Where are South Africans staying, and where are the non-South African stays, and from which countries they're at? Once you have a view of the country's map, then you can make better and informed decisions. Because at the moment, we don't know whether we're talking about 100 tourists or 100,000 tourists.
Yes.
You know, once you have a grapple of that, then better decisions can be made in terms of movement in that regard.
And I like that, Cisa, because I've been saying, I think we've all been saying that why it's so important for us as Tourism Update as well to inform, because fear is driven by lack of information. Once we have the information, we can make those decisions.
Absolutely. And we've got to understand, though, that we make decisions based on the best available information at that point in time.
Yes.
When the information changes, we will change our views and thoughts based on that. The key thing is to be predictable, but based on the changing landscape, we can move on that one. Part of the difficulty with this pandemic is how easily and how quickly it spreads. Right.
Yes.
And you know, I've had to almost become a doctor lately, you know, really kind of understand some of the issue there.
Yeah.
The key thing here that I want to really put forward to the sector is about contact tracing, right?
Yes.
This becomes important because if any one person tests positive, you then have to trace all the way back as to who else they came into contact with.
And when they came into contact
100%.
with those people, yeah.
And then everyone they came into contact with, trace them as well as to whom they also came into contact with. So you can kind of understand that in terms of how the ripple effect. If you don't contain that, this is where they talk about the flattening of the curve.
Yes.
If you don't contain that, that curve spikes up, you know, quite disproportionately, and you get pandemics of a huge nature. The issue here is we're trying to curtail down this curve by contact tracing where people are at. Now, again, to go back in terms of once you have a country view of where tourists are at, you are then able to ultimately to contact trace those individual tourists should any of them test positive. If you don't, then that becomes a problem. Again, a practical example, if CISA tests positive on Wednesday, you got to go back for the last 14 days to see where he's been at. And if he was at Lodge X and there were 10 other guests at Lodge X, guess what? All those 10 other guests also have to kind of go back. And that's the ripple down effect of the issue here. I've been asked some question then, okay, if we have non-South African guests at our different lodges and accommodation, what do we do? First of all, they are allowed to leave the country. What we are saying is that we are asking all establishment owners to verify that they are indeed going to the airport or getting a flight and leaving from the perspective. They will be tested on exit. Right? And the idea is that even if you find the results a week or so later, two things happen. A, they will be informed, so they're empowered themselves, even when they're back in the home country. Secondly, then, it allows us as a country to trace back as to where this tourist was and everything else.
Potentially the local coffee shop where they could potentially
Absolutely. And that's the thing. We're looking for this information so that we can make an informed decision. Because once they've left, yes, they may physically have left, but they've left the country a gift, essentially. And that's what we are really trying to get through.
Absolutely.
So it's not about stigmatization. No. It's not about kicking people out. It's about the safety, right? In the same way, the state has a responsibility to look after the health and care of its citizens. We've got to make sure that we've got this in place.
Can I jump in there,
Please,
if you don't mind? I think this also brings us back to, you know, some of them, I'm presuming that we've been reporting on practically an hourly basis about which airlines have stopped flying, which airlines, you know, what's closing down, etc. But those people that were on the planes that were not allowed to disembark, we're not sure if, for example, they may have spousal visas or that sort of situation. How are we handling that? Where do we get the right information so that the tour operators? I had a tour operator phoning me and saying on Friday afternoon, saying, Adele, I've got my two elderly UK people wanting to fly back, but SAA stopped flying. How do we handle that? Where can they get the right information around that?
Okay. again, it's another example of decisions are made based on needing to react quite quickly.
Yes.
However, the implications of it now almost have to be threaded thereafter.
Yes, exactly.
Again, what officials will do, they will err on the side of caution, of extreme caution or conservatism, until some of these questions work their way through the system.
Okay.
Now, what I'm going to ask the tourism community, bring us these questions that you may have, so that we can start a frequently asked question section, FAQ.
Yes.
Because believe me, whatever you're asking, you're not the only one that's asking it. There's a whole other community asking
Absolutely.
them. What we will do is to make sure that as far as possible, we get answers to these questions in order for everyone to kind of sing from the same hymn sheet. Right? Yes. I meet with the minister and for the command center 3 times a week.
Wow.
There's an opportunity again to take these questions across, to get answers, and then relay them down the line. So again, please forward questions to us that we are able to pick up and then answer them systematically over time.
Fantastic.
You want to have almost a whole set of frequently asked questions that have answers to them that can actually start to give some sort of a comfort. Again,
fantastic.
Most of them will change once
some of the questions
policy decisions are made, and that kind of comes through. But we've got to be on the ball as and when we get them. Let's see what we can do based around that.
And I think that's a good time for us to also say, send your questions to Tourism Update, editor@tourismupdate.co.za, and we will make sure that CISA and the team get those questions as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, CISA. I really appreciate that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think, as you say, one of the things is, first of all, our number one priority is preservation of life and livelihood. And the quicker we comply and the quicker we react, the better the risk mitigation around that.
Look, absolutely. It is not business as usual.
No.
It can never be business as usual, not just for the tourism sector, but, right across business. The risk is simply just not worth it. And I know this may sound crude and simple, but that extra $100 that you may be getting is just simply not worth the risk that has been taken on board. The world is shutting down, right, in order to get a grip or a handle on this. And I'm asking every tourism industry player out there, please play your part. Right now, it's about prioritizing preservation of life. And this kind of comes quite difficult for someone like me who's a CEO of a tourism board. My job is to make people travel.
Exactly.
Right now is to tell them not to travel.
To postpone, don't cancel.
Well, look, again, and I see many different versions of this coming through. Honestly, I haven't made up my mind what actually means.
Really,
Here's a couple of scenarios just to kind of put through, and I'll let you into my thinking at the moment, is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Right? We will come through this.
Yes.
But I have a hypothesis that a sector will be fundamentally different.
Yes.
Right? So therefore, what are you postponing? You can't be postponing the same experience. You get what I'm saying?
Makes very
How we
sense.
deliver the services to our customers, to the tourists, will be different.
Yes.
I think this crisis will shape us differently. I will see a lot more technology. I kind of see checking in on front desk of hotels as something of the past, right? Where technology can take over. I think this is what's going to push us over. So again, I was really saying, postponing, what are you postponing? All right.
Good
Secondly, as well, is scenario planning and our recovery plan. I am working a recovery plan that I will share with the industry in due course that says, well, when the airlines shut down, right, and stop flying to South Africa, the schedule that they had before would not be maintained thereafter. So don't think just because Emirates flew 5 times a week, they will continue 5 times a week thereafter. It will fundamentally change. Secondly, as well, we're not sure where we are on the priorities of the different airlines, because it also
South Africa
gives
as a
them,
country, you mean?
Absolutely, it gives those airlines an opportunity to regroup as well, to make some of those difficult decisions which they've been shelving for such a long time. So understand, structurally, this entire sector is going to change. Again, so what will the tourism world look like after the crisis, and how are we going to position ourselves accordingly then? These are just some of the questions that we kind of have, and we're working through the different scenarios. But essentially, our job is to make sure that we keep people focused, we provide them information, and to provide some hope. We will overcome. And the key message that I'm even communicating to government, the president, the minister, is that the first sector that will turn around the quickest will be tourism.
I tend to agree with you on that. I think people
with the hardest hit up front right now, 100%, because we are, but we'll also be the first one that turns the dial quite quickly.
Because when we start celebrating life, we want to travel, we want to get out again, we want to,
yes, absolutely. Then the other one as well is it's important that as a country, as a tourism destination, we're not forgotten by the world during this dark period, as it were, right? But surely our presence cannot be in the same form that was before. Travel to our beaches, travel to our safari, etc., etc.
Yes.
We now have to recalibrate as to how we show up to the world. We have to show up, and that's the work that's being done at the moment to make sure that South Africa is not forgotten, but we've got to position South Africa as being part of the solution, empathizing, and the country brand that people will remember, when the gates are opened again, as it were, that we are still top of mind as a traveling destination.
Very much so. And we were talking earlier before we started recording this about some of the questions that have come through are sort of about immediate challenges. And as you say, those details continually change. And we will put through via SA Tourism and all the relevant TVCSA, SATSA, FedHasa, etc., all the sort of advice that's been provided. But longer term, when we return, when the gates open, as you say, and we know the gates are going to open.
But what will determine, by the way, how quickly the gates open is how we behave now.
Yes,
in this period.
Exactly.
So if we delay making the difficult, hard decisions, the recovery will be exponentially longer. That's the reality of it.
Absolutely.
Right? If we take the pain up front now, and very hard pain, bitter pill to swallow,
very much
our recovery will be much quicker. Right?
Be much quicker.
What you want to do, by the way, is that you almost want to be in tandem and on par with the recovery of your source markets. If there's a lag or a delay, there's a problem over there. So if our major source markets turn around quicker and we are still dealing with backlog, anything 3 months, 6 months, believe me, will be forgotten from there.
For sure.
So conceptually, I'm trying to time this, best case is that we turn around at the same time, at least around about the same time as our key source markets.
Yeah, I think that's very key, very much so. And then we also know that it won't necessarily be business as usual, but we will get back to business as soon as we're able to do that. And that re-emphasizing what you said is we have to err on the side of caution, we have to act responsibly. And I certainly, from the communications we're receiving from our readers as well, is they seem to be on the same page as that, which as you're thinking, which is very key. But let's look at when the gates open. Are there there's certain sort of inhibitors to tourism that at the moment we're all focusing on short-term action against the spread of COVID-19, but can we use this opportunity as well, perhaps, to look at some of the issues that have been hampering us, like making it easier with e-visas, like the National Public Transport Regulator, and those kind of challenges, because we want to be ready to welcome people. If we can manage, which I think is possible now, is if we can manage to be on par with when our source markets start traveling again. There are those issues that need to be addressed. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely agree with you. Is that this quiet or dark period gives us an opportunity to actually address some of the structural things that have been hanging as a noose around our neck, to actually fix them. You are right in terms of the barriers to entry, right? Movement, mobility, policy, environment, and everything else. We have the opportunity to fix them now. The reality, however, is that our competitors are also not sleeping. Right?
Of course.
We're just making changes to catch up to them. They will also move up, incrementally as well. So it's almost like, how do we quantum leap, so that we can at least be ahead and above basically our competitors. SA Tourism, we are looking at the entire ecosystem, the environment, from policy making, from efficiency side, especially those areas, by the way, that are not necessarily within the direct control of SA Tourism or the Department of Tourism, but with our other partners, whether it be Home Affairs. It's amazing now, when you talk about safety and security, it's no longer crime, but rather personal health and safety.
Yes.
So it's amazing how the perspective kind of changes. Yes. Food preparation, by the way, will change.
Of course.
We'll never be able to do some of the things that we currently do. So again, how do we quickly get a view or a fix on what the future state will look like, so that we can do the hard work now to prepare ourselves when things do turn? We are actually at the front end of it. And I think that becomes important. We've got to look at the use of technology. What does it mean? Certainly ever since I joined SA Tourism, I've been speaking quite a lot around technology, around apps, around a visitor use type of device. It's time to do those things now. It really is time. Digital is the way to go, but what do we mean by digital, and how do we connect, South Africa, our travelers up in a way that it becomes a very seamlessly way to explore the country? We've been speaking quite a bit around geographic spread, making sure that tourists not just go to the well-known urban side, but also the rural side as well.
Very
because if you don't do that, you're going to get a congestion and over-tourism. And we've seen, some parts of the country that are having that at the moment. Here's an opportunity, say, to develop other destinations. Again, if you come into the country for the 5th or 6th time, you've got new things to explore. You've got to set those up now. Yes. Accommodation establishments, what will they look like? What does ecotourism mean? And all of those advancements. Again, it is making sure that we can do that work now, so that when the gates do open, we are a slicker, kind of more efficient destination to travel to. It's making sure as well that even with the airlines, we are close to them, even though they've shut down, most of them. But we've done such hard work to convince them to fly to the country.
Yes.
And simply with just a snap of the wrist like that, they stop flying. Guess what? It's going to take some effort again to bring them back on.
Of course it is.
Because they're going to look at who's more profitable, who's more turn on, and they're going to prioritize those. We may not be, but we've got to make sure that we punch way above our size, and make sure that we get our fair share of the market share.
Absolutely. So we may be isolating, but we're not stopping. We're just carrying on.
Absolutely. Again, it's almost looking within and doing that deep work of changing. And again, I would advise, the industry to do the same. We all have those projects that we'll be shelving. We know we should do them. Here's the opportunity now to kind of say, how do you relook? How do you disrupt your own business, essentially, so that you get a better business and more robust business going forward?
Absolutely. And I think in the past couple of weeks, we've all sort of been talking about being in survival mode because things keep changing. But once we have that little bit of calm where we can sit and absolutely relook our structures, relook our strategies, our marketing strategies.
And I say this quite very much aware of the everyday realities. If you're going to look at a smaller business and you're going to look at the cash flow that they have to sustain themselves with zero revenues, most doesn't go past 30 days, right? So I know a lot of you right now asking yourselves in terms of, we're coming to month end now. You may be somehow able to scramble to pay off staff, rent, and everything else. What happens next month?
Exactly.
And again, these are the difficult, conversations and decisions. And again, in terms of communicating these to on a regular basis, some of the concessions that UIF has kind of said through in terms of being able to access UIF, for those employees that are laid off and everything else from the perspective. This is a country effort. not just a tourism effort, country effort. And I'm quite, grateful to see the banks coming to the party, as announced this morning as well, in terms of giving reprieve. But there again, they're also shooting in the dark. Some are giving 3 months. They have no clue how long this will last.
How long this is going to last.
So if it lasts 6 months, they can only keep on extending it for a finite amount of time, but not forever. So again, what I'm really trying to say to the sector, our commitment is to make consistent and regular communication.
Yes.
I may not have the answers at that point in time, right? And I'll be very honest with you when I don't have the answers. But I will fetch the answers as much as I can and communicate them back into the system. Nothing about this is going to be perfect. Nothing about this has been perfect in any destination around the world. We're all chasing our tails, right?
Very much so.
But again, if we provide information quickly, if we provide information consistently, at least you can make informed decision to the best of your ability at this point.
Very much so. And the same thing with our journalists is we've been, as you say, we had communication from ComAir, for example, one of the airlines, saying that they had closed all regional flights. Then they came back and they said, no, hang on, it was just Mauritius. And then they made another, because that's what's happening to people's decisions. They're trying to make the best decision for themselves and their customers every hour, really. I want to go back to what you were saying as well. And so I think that absolutely we provide consistent and regular communication, but also always with people must look at it in the back of their mind and the fact that this can change in an hour's time. And we will make sure that we give the updated information
I think
at a later stage.
The case in point is today.
Yes.
I think after the president speaks, it will change.
It will change, absolutely.
We don't know what he will say, but again, it's about how do we quickly get in the back of what he said and look for, as to how the sector can organize itself and implement. It's collaboration and coordination. We are constantly speaking all the time with the Tourism Business Council, which is obviously the body that represents the private sector, to make sure there's alignment and, again, constant communication there.
Absolutely. And your team has me on speed dial and vice versa. Hey, Nonku. I want to go back to one thing that you were talking about. You were saying at least the banks were giving reprieve. There's also something that the government's doing in terms of helping small businesses to cope. What can you elaborate on that? Do you know the...
Sure. So there is the Department of Small Business, I forget the acronym, DBSD or something like that, and they have put together a fund. I think it opens on Tuesday or Thursday, I'm not too sure. That today, all right. Tomorrow, Tuesday, yes. That will allow eligible businesses to go and actually apply. What I would do, it is sector agnostic, so it's not a tourism sector one or specific one, but it's about small businesses. I would say please go to the website, find the criteria, find the definition of how they define what a small business is. And again, those options are available to you as well. And maybe what we could do then in terms of even on our sites, how do we probably bring that information together so we can go to one place and being able to access the small business development at UIF stuff that I've spoken about and any other
look at how the banks are dealing with it with small businesses and with
Again, these are responses as a form of reprieve, but they're certainly not sustainable in the long run. And and I think it's that how long is a piece of string, on this issue, that's the challenge here.
Fantastic. Can you summarize, Cisa, sort of you mentioned sort of 3 strong points that we need to focus on. Can you summarize those points for us now?
Okay. The first one is safety, right? As a business, please prioritize the safety of your employees. Do not put them in harm's way because for commercial reasons. Secondly, as well, it's also the safety of your guests, right? When you accept tourists or visitors on board, understand the implications of that. You have no clue where they come from. We have no clue who they've been in contact with. And this virus is so contagious. It's invisible, essentially. And, it shows symptoms. It's got delayed symptoms, So be sensible, if I can put it that way. Rather err on the side of caution, be conservative. Ask the questions that you ask. But I plead of you, understand the context of where we're in. We may not have all the answers. Right now is to comply, and we'll answer later. And, the environment changes fundamentally when we're in a state of emergency. It's no longer asking for opinions or your views or what you think. It's about implement.
Absolutely,
because the country is in a crisis, lockdown. I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm just saying we've got to prepare ourselves for that, because preservation of lives comes first and foremost above anything else. Thirdly, it's about information, right? What this crisis has done, it showed a weakness of the sector to be able to have information available. A lot of the stuff that we have is either available in individual databases that are sitting at company or corporate level, or even hard copies that are sitting in cabinets. So therefore, to pull a country view, to have a sense of what is happening where and how, is a weakness of ours. That is one of the projects that we will undertake during this quiet period, to actually equip ourselves so that at a click of a button we know what is happening across the board. Should we have in any future any existential kind of pressure coming in, we're able to get a bit of a sense who's where, what, how, and how do we take decisive action. At the moment, we're kind of driving in the dark and working on instinct, and that in itself lends into some inaccurate decisions. But we err on the side of caution for now until we get a better handle of what's going on. And then lastly as well is communication. I can imagine right now that we are all being drowned with communication out there, right? And at some point in time, we all will be saturated and you can't hear anything else. Within that, there's also misinformation, miscommunication right across the board. You don't know what source to trust, and everyone has a tale out there. Everyone has a friend in Italy right now that's actually giving them a view. Everyone knows someone in China right now who's got an inside information. Everyone in the US knows, you get what I'm saying? That's kind of the state that we're in. And all I'm asking is for some calm, right? Just make sensible decisions, and let's share as much information as we can. This sector is resilient. We've come through quite a lot.
So much.
And, we're faced with the drought not so long ago. We've got safety and security issues out there. But believe you me, we are blessed with such a beautiful country. And it's in how we repackage ourselves and make sure that we can kick hard and rightfully earn our place in the world, as a desired tourism destination.
Very much so. Thank you very much. I just wanted, before we close, we've got an interesting comment from one of our readers. He says, one of the concerns we have as tour operators in South Africa is that all these postponements of accommodation, and I like the fact that the industry is also coming up with solutions.
Yes.
Because you always, when you and I, every single time we sit down, we always emphasize we want to work with the trade. The minister says the same thing. Please send us your solutions. Let's talk about, yes, these are the issues, but let's talk about the solutions. And I like this. He says, one of the concerns we have is that with all these postponements of accommodation, which we are thankful for from our suppliers, that we're going to have massive pressure to rebook all our guests in a shorter period, and before their respective deadlines, mostly within 12 months. In other words, what they're trying to do at this stage, based on the information they have at hand, is to postpone rather than cancel. What happens when there's a shortage of availability and or the dates that we are needing don't match availability with flights when guests are able to travel, etc.? He suggests, would it not be worth suppliers rather considering the tour operators with credits for bed nights? For example, X amount of deluxe rooms, X amount of suites at a particular hotel or lodge. We then get to use those credits with any postponed bookings to try to use all those credits as soon as we can. So instead of X, Y, Z having to use 4 nights of a certain room type, we can use our allocation to fit best with all our postponed travelers. Then thereby not having to try to match the exact postponement availability. And when that traveller can actually travel, we need to bear in mind that they have several stops in their postponed itinerary. Sounds like a bit of an impossible puzzle, but is that something we could,
right
is it
now,
something the industry needs
absolutely.
to do?
I think right now we are open to consider all forms of options out there. And I appreciate ideas, I appreciate thoughts, and please do keep them coming. We will certainly consider it in part of the recovery plan that I spoke of as well, to make sure that we can, A, be competitive, B, is to recover, rebuild as quickly as possible. Now, this is one of those issues where everything we do is relative.
Yeah.
It's relative to how quickly our competitor destinations also come on board. It is relative to how innovative they are going to become as well in capturing the attention of the tourists in the world. Again, you can imagine the rush that will happen when the gates do open. Yes. Everyone's going to be screaming. You can almost visualize a hall where everyone's screaming at the same time. How do we make sure that our voice is heard above all of this noise that is coming there?
Yes.
And it's going to require us to think differently. So I really appreciate such opinions and views. And tell you what, we'll figure this out together. And that's the commitment I can make. So I can not at all be arrogant to say I'll go in the corner, I'll come back with all the decisions and solutions and but certainly put a frame together and let's debate it, and collectively I think we can make some really, really awesome decisions.
And you know what? The silver lining is that we have been saying as a collective industry for so long that we need to collaborate. And I think the penny has finally dropped. We really do. We need each other to survive.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So let's build the instruments, let's build the platforms that allow for this collaboration, that allow for this connectivity, that allow for seamless flow of communication, that also allows for ideas to be detained, and kind of considered there, whilst keeping in mind that, our partners that are pro-South Africa around the world, that sell us as well, also need to be informed and updated.
Yes.
And what we've done is we have literally closed all of our international offices. All of our staff is working from home. The work that they used to do can no longer be done.
Right, of course.
Because some of them are actually in countries that are literally locked down. And they're doing their best to make sure that South Africa is still top of mind. And they are literally servicing all of those accounts that actually sell South Africa, that they are able to pass through very reliable and consistent information. So these may be blind to us as an industry whilst we look down at our own crisis, but we've got to make sure that our important markets are also kept up to speed with what South Africa is doing, and we've really taken some tough decisions, but I think very responsible decisions. Net, when you look at the number of confirmed cases we have relative to other destinations, we just don't want to fall into that trap of being complacent. Rather go at the front end and make sure that we can really, pin this down. And again, that's why you see sometimes the decisions may seem erratic, the decisions may seem uncoordinated, but believe you me, they are at the best interest of the country.
Yes, very much so. CISA, we look forward to seeing the recovery plan as soon as as and when it unfolds, because I'm sure that the recovery plan also will evolve as things evolve. I want to say thank you to those. We have over 700 people that have registered for this. Unfortunately, our platforms don't allow for more than 500 to register. 700. So we've got, okay, excellent. So I've just spoken to our IT guy, and apparently we can accommodate every single one of you that have registered, which is fantastic. But just to let you know that if you do have questions after this, you're welcome to send them once again to that email address, editor@tourismupdate.co.za. And we will try and to get SA Tourism, CISA, and the people to answer them as soon as possible. We will also provide a link after the webinar so that you can listen in after the fact if you couldn't make it between 1:30 and 2:30 today. CISA Renee Nonku, thank you so much for coming in and for putting time aside in a very, very, very busy time. And one of our staff members came up with a really good sign off. She says, "Yours in social distancing."
Mhm.
So yours in social distancing. Keep those questions coming. And
if I may, Adele, before
yes,
we
of
close
course.
off, I've been speaking quite a lot about communicating and connecting there. The commitment that I want to make is that once a week I will come have a webinar
Good.
and have this conversation with the sector. At the very least, let's start with that communicating. Again, I'm happy to pick up questions. I'm also equally happy to pick up suggestions, best practice, and any other thing that will help us to actually come through the sector. I'm not sure of the day and time, but I think we can get through and communicate that so that everyone knows
We'll
that
communicate that
at a certain day, lesson time, consistently, we can have conversations.
Very much so. We were talking about that earlier, and we will communicate the day and time. We'll probably at least do it once a week, as you said, and that'll give you. We will probably have to pre-record again, things being the way they are with global data platforms also being very heavily used. But in that week, send us your comments, send us your suggestions, send us your best practice, send us your comments, and then we'll get them through to CISA before we have the webinar. We can address those, and that's what we'll do for the in the meantime. Hey,
right.
All right, and as I said, yours in social distancing. Let's we're all in the same boat. Let's stay strong, and we will overcome this, guys. Take care.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks.